Alright, question 36. Evaluate the trig function using its period as an aid. Sine of negative 8 pi thirds. Alright, so let's go ahead and find that location. And sine will be the y value at that location. So, two ways to find this location, and then we'll go back and talk about what these directions are trying to get us to consider. We could A, know how much 1 pi third is, which is 60 degrees, and then we could count 8 of those in the negative direction. So here's 0 radians, 0 pi radians, and if I go clockwise, here's about negative 1 pi third. Go another 60 degrees to get negative 2 pi thirds. Another 60 degrees to get negative 3 pi thirds. Keep going. Negative 4 pi thirds. Negative 5 pi thirds. Negative 6 pi thirds. Negative 7 pi thirds. And finally negative 8 pi thirds. So, unit circle coordinate pair there would be negative 1/2 and negative square root of 3 over 2. And because it's asking the sine value, the answer to the question would be negative square root of 3 over 2. So, back to the directions here. Use its period as an aid. So when I counted and went all the way around here, when I said negative 1 pi thirds, negative 2 pi thirds, negative 3, negative 4, negative 5, negative 6. So what happened is I really just did a full rotation, and then the values started repeating themselves. So whatever I get at 0, I then again got at negative pi over 3. Whatever the location, whatever the coordinate pair is at negative pi over 3, we get the same thing at negative 7 pi over 3, because those angles are coterminal. So another way to ask what is the sine of negative 8 pi thirds is we could have thought about negative 8 pi thirds and said, well, wait, let me add a rotation to that. Let me add 2 pi. And you would want to get a common denominator, and you would get negative 2 pi thirds. So notice, negative 2 pi thirds is coterminal to negative 8 pi thirds. Since I counted that out and labeled that, that's pretty obvious. Now, maybe this angle is more familiar to you than this angle. So that's how that could be helpful. By adding 2 pi, by adding a period, we can still figure out the location and the sine value, or cosine value if we need to. If negative 2 pi thirds is not familiar, then force yourself to add another rotation, add another 2 pi, or add another 6 pi thirds, and then you get that all of these angles are coterminal. Negative 8 pi thirds, negative 2 pi thirds, and 4 pi thirds. All of those angles are in the same location. And because they're in the same location, they're going to have the same coordinate pair. And because they have the same coordinate pair, they will have the same sine value. So that's what it's referring to as period. All of these angles have the same sine value because it just keeps repeating, because you just keep going around the circle.